It has never been harder to bring on new technology in an organization. Taking a call with us does not make someone a champion, it makes them a contact. We have to develop champions, and we can figure out whether people are receptive to that or not. We don't have to wait. We have to teach buyers how to buy. Buyers are experts in how to do their jobs. They are not experts in how to buy our thing.
Let's see, how late was I? 5 minutes? 4 minutes? Did you, by the way, Sam, did you catch the other day when Matt goes, I forget what he said. It was like maybe Christmas gifts. You're like, Matt goes, I'm going to get Craig an alarm clock because I was 35 minutes late to the recording.
From ABM to PLG, from Medic to MedPick, the world of business is constantly evolving. We'll cover the who, what, where, when, why, and most importantly, how you get the transaction. I'm Matt Amundsen, and he's Craig Rosenberg. Let's get started.
So, Krysten, I got to tell you, when we had Orlob on the show, we've had him twice, but at one point there was he had come on and there was a LinkedIn post about the multi-threading. And we're like, hey, can you tell me about multi-threading? He's like, no, you got to talk to Krysten Connor about that one because she created that stuff. And that's when I first started to really dig into your stuff. And so, and now I'm just like a big fan. So I'm so excited to bring you on. Yeah. And so just so everyone knows, today's guest is a sales expert, and I'd call you coach, trainer, consultant, right? That is modern. That's key for Matt, Sam, and I, Krysten, just so you know, because I mean, look, we've had, we have old school guys because they got a lot to say, but like selling SaaS in today's world requires a significant relook in the playbook, and you're one of those people that talks about the right things, speaks about writes about the right things. And so, yeah, you had years of selling experience, and now you've taken that and you've become a thought leader in the sales execution space. It sounds, you do training. So with Chris on P Club, you have your own business, right?
Mm-hmm.
People can go to KrystenConnor.com for that. And people can just follow you to get a feel for, hopefully the podcast will help them sort of see the beauty of what you do, but also your, the stuff that you're putting out there, or through, if they happen to see you through any of the other sort of channels by which you deliver some of your insights. But it's a real honor to have you on the show, Krysten. And we've been excited about it. It's a new year. So we haven't had a sales specific person on in like a month, and that's rare for us. So it's great to have you as that person to break the 2025 ice. So welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for the very kind words. Yeah, Orlob has been super fun to collaborate with. We've done 2 courses with them now, and yeah, to your point about sales being different now, it is, and it's a matter of how do we, and I think a lot of it is for the better, right? It's more, I think it's hopefully more transparent, hopefully more conversational, hopefully more buyer centric, versus like, let me come alongside and help you, versus like, what do I need to say to get you in this car today type of emotion.
Yeah, by the way, you guys, I have a funny story on let me help you get this started. So we had a buddy growing up. There's a sad part to it, but it is important context. But like he's just a great friend of ours. He got in a bike accident. We were in 4th or 5th, and he was actually in a coma for a week or 2. But it really rattled him. So it changed, and like it was hard. Like he wasn't hanging with the crew, and we kept sort of growing up, and we weren't as close to him. We liked him, but like we just weren't as close to him. We had gotten out of high school, so we were like 19, and like he didn't go to college. He sort of stayed around here, and someone said, hey, he's working at the car dealership. And so I'm like, dude, that's awesome. Like, if you think about it, what a comeback story. And, he's like, screw it, I'm just going to go sell stuff, right, and build my business career. And so I was like, I'm going to go visit him and just say hi. It's like, I feel terrible. Like we hadn't hung out throughout our childhood, whatever. So we go in there and he's so professional. Back then, man, those dudes were all buttoned up. Like, he was probably drinking Sanka coffee and whatever. He had his thing. And I'm like, hey, man, how you doing? Like, whatever. And he's like, oh, my God, it's so great to see you. And I'm like, cool. So what's going on? We're sort of in mid-conversation. He's like, well, Craig, let me ask you this. What are you doing for a car these days? And I'm like, I'm not kidding. And he's like, well, let me show you this car and let's see if this is not a car that you don't want to drive off the lot today. I'm not kidding. So like, it's this, I got this thing where I'm like, oh my God, it's so great to see him. And then he just drops that bomb on me. And I'm like, Brett, man, I am not buying a car. I mean, I was just out of college. I was like a teacher. I was like, there's no chance. But anyway, yeah, he was going to see if I couldn't drive that car off the lot today. So anyway, Krysten, against
made it weird.
At least he went with a discovery question, except he didn't ask me what I liked and didn't like about my car. He just asked if I had one, So
yeah. I feel like that was a transition question. I don't feel like we could really say that was a discovery question.
Yeah, that was a deep discovery. By the way, second fun fact I meant to mention in the intro was that we've had a couple ex-Sales Loft people on, and they went viral for us. So it's really great to have an ex outreach person on, like just to even think. We had Cause a Glow. Yeah, and so now we're just so everyone knows we're evening things out. All right, so we got two things to start the show.
Well,
One,
Sam has something to share.
I was going to say, God. You mentioned Causaglow as a former outreach guy. No love for Scott Barker? What's up with that?
Oh, well, he hasn't.
His episode hasn't gone live yet.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. There we go. All right, good. So there's two ways we start the show. One I didn't warn you about. So if I put you on the spot here, I apologize. But it's because it's a new feature wrinkle that was introduced by Matt. It's been really amazing. We want to start the show with a story from you on anything over the. You must have seen lots. It could be funny. It could be heroic sales story, go-to-market story. Anything like in your travels around helping sales teams that would be a sort of fun or interesting or heroic story that you saw last year.
Yeah, it can be an old elementary school friend of yours who's trying to sell you a Chevrolet Grand Caprice.
I kind of preemptively. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I wouldn't say last year, but over the years, I will say I have done so many, there have been so many embarrassing moments in my sales career. And so what I've learned is there is very little that you can't recover from. Your buddy's question about how do I get you in this car? That might be something that would be hard to recover from. But for example, one of my first bosses in one of my first sales roles, I was selling large commercial insurance. And in insurance to very large contractors. And so we were going to meet them on site, and my boss, his pet peeve was being late. He hated to be late. And he had there was this rumor that he had actually left part of the team, when they did not come down to the lobby and meet him on time. So, I mean, it was you were on time. So he had gone down to bring his car around. He had a white Lexus. Three of us out there at the building lobby waiting for his white Lexus to pull up. See the white Lexus pull up. The three of us each go pull a door of the white Lexus, only to realize this is not his white Lexus. And the lady goes, excuse me? Because every door of her car has just been opened. And we were because we were so focused on get in that car so you don't get left. And so we were oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And so then we all, we're all oh my gosh, and we close the door quickly, and they're maybe he, our boss was far enough that he didn't see that, right? That he didn't, he's two cars behind, and he was not a nice man. And he's you are such bozos. You don't even know what car it's in. And we're just
oh my God.
Yeah. So that was, so that's one. I've asked whenever I was traveling, like more than 80% of the time, I joined a team meeting on a Zoom call, which I did frequently because I was always traveling, and I had forgotten to turn the camera off first, and I was like literally in the middle, like I have a hair appointment, and one of my peers was like, "Whoa!" I was like,
a Zoom fail. I love it.
Yeah. Oh, it was. I mean, this was before 2020, right? So it was somewhat excusable. After 2020, we should all know how to use Zoom. And then there was one time I think this was 2019, that I accidentally did what I never do, which is put my laptop in the back, in like the seat back flap on an airplane, and forgot it on the airplane, and was like down the tunnel runway, and then turned around, which I didn't realize is a huge no. You are not allowed to reboard. I was nearly tackled by like a TSA agent. The airport on that would have to be hilarious. So all that to say, I've done all of those things and many more, and you can still go on and have a great sales career. And you'll have a lot of those stories.
Yeah, those are road warrior stories, and I love that. Those are actually I think that's our first. No, we had some others similar road warrior. I'm so glad you went with the embarrassing moments too, because those are great. It's that's full opening with authenticity at its finest. So
you have to laugh or you cry, right? And also everyone, once you start, everyone has them. Everyone has them.
Yeah, totally. All right, cool. So that's perfect. So Matt, once again, your 2.1 feature enhancement worked swimmingly here. I love it. And actually, Sam, I think we should not tell people about the story thing in advance too, because it's awesome to watch them come up and be able to riff on the stories. I think it's great. Okay, but this is one that we were prepared for. So the way we kick off the show. And just for context, we just, it's how we started, how I was talking about you. One of the reasons we want you on the show is because Matt and I were working together at Scale Venture Partners, and we just kept going, my God, the playbook has changed, right? Yeah. I mean, and it was funny because we were watching, and they, some of the companies we were working with would bring in this person that's got all these years of experience, and even had, let's say, a 5-year run of doing something great in marketing, sales, CS, Matt, and it would flop because a lot had changed and you had to make adjustments with the time. So for us, we actually started the show with this idea that could we go meet people like you and understand the changes to and what you need to think about and what you need to do in the new playbook. So the first question is, what's something or some things, it could be multiple, that the market thinks they're doing right. It could be methodology, approach, tactics, anything. And they're actually wrong, and they should be thinking about it differently. And what is that thing or those things, and what should they be doing? And so we start with that, and we'll let you go, and we take it from there.
Yeah, I saw that prep come over, and it's a really smart question, right? I was like, this, and it's a different take. There's so many sales podcasts, but that's a different take. So the thing I immediately came to my mind was a mindset that I think many reps have. I certainly had it early in my career, which is wait for a champion to show themselves. We have to kind of wait, or it's almost a reactive. It's like a reactive mindset in a sales cycle where you're just we have to just have to see. We have to be we have to be mid-cycle before we know if they're really a champion. Now, that kind of also speaks to my experience doing mostly new logo. Right. So everywhere I was, I came in as a hunter primarily. So if you're an AM and you're managing a book of customers where you already know people, sometimes you'll have to develop new champions. But in new logo, where you're just talking to these people for you're trying to introduce your brand, your company, and you're trying to do this deal. You don't know who's who in the zoo, right? You're still figuring it out. But there is this feeling, this tendency that's well, I just have to kind of sit back and wait to figure out who's going to be my champion versus versus being proactive about it. And there's this phrase of like champion testing. I don't really like that phrase because it is like puts the rep in like this position of like this, like with a checkbox, like, are you good enough? And that's not it at all. But it's really developing a champion. Like we have to develop champions, and we can figure out whether people are receptive to that or not. But we don't have to wait. There are things that we can do proactively, even after one of the very early calls.
Let's get into this. I love this.
That was provocative. I like it.
Yes. Yeah. Let's get into this.
Yeah. You mentioned Peak Love in my course with them. This is actually part of my second course with them, which is keeping momentum in a sale, because we're very rarely taught about that in sales either. You know what it feels like when a deal has momentum, and sales leaders will hound you about like, why are we losing momentum here? But there's very little like instruction about like, how do you keep momentum versus just getting blasted for not having it. And so how do we kind of start that momentum and get things rolling really well, and then keep that up starting at the beginning? And I would say 3 ways that we can proactively think about how do we know if we have a champion or potential champion. Number 1 is, do they do work asynchronous of meeting with us? Number 2 is, do they bring other people to follow-up meetings? And number 3 is, do they have a point of view on next steps? Like if you say, hey, typically we work with CFOs, but also usually a COO has to come in here, and then IT as well. I don't know how that is in your org. Maybe it's a bit different. They should be able to go off and running from that and be like, no. In our org, we have to start here and then this. And they may not have the exact right answer, but they should have a point of view on how things get done in their organization. Like instead of, before we go to the COO, we really need to talk to the chief of staff, because this isn't going anywhere unless they bless it. You'll never know that by looking at our org chart, but we'll have to talk to them first. Like they should have a point of view.
Okay. So, but these are the things we look for, or these are the things we also can cultivate in them? Like,
Yeah. So do they have a point of view and next steps? If they don't have it, that can mean they're new to this org and they've never bought anything here. Right. Yeah. So it's not necessarily like a red flag if they don't have it, but that's actually then an area where we can come alongside them. And I also, kind of in the theme of being proactive, I'm of the opinion that we have to teach buyers how to buy. Yes. Because buyers are experts in how to do their jobs. They are not experts in how to buy our thing. And so like, think about, and we've experienced this personally, if you've had a good realtor, right? Like a realtor a good one should teach you how to buy a house, right? Like, well, first you have to get it inspected, and then we should do this, and you should probably have a structural engineer take a look at it, right? Like they're selling it to you. They're going to make some commission, but they should be teaching you how to do this, right? So it's like we can do that in a B2B capacity, not just B2C. So a simple kind of way of trying to develop a champion and seeing if they're willing to do this. So examples of asynchronous work that they can do. Will they collect some data that we need and bring that to the next meeting? Will they have an internal conversation with a peer of theirs that's going to help inform our next meeting? Will they ask somebody internally to do a relevant task on their behalf? If they're a VP, will they ask a manager or an IT director, hey, can you pull this data for me, right? Will they ask somebody to do something? Will they have someone come on the next call with them? Will they forward an email when we ask them to do it? Like, it's not hard things. Like, it's just these very simple, like very simple, like relationship things where we figure out how willing are you to be a partner on this with me? And we start slow, right? Like we don't ask somebody to get married on the first date, right? Like we ask like, what restaurant do you want to go to next? Right. It's like, it's simple. It's baby steps.
So let me ask you a tactical question, because I'd love a little clarity here. So would you say, like, let's say you have a discovery call, you're having an early stage phone call. If there's multiple people on the call, are you saying like, hey, as a next step, we're going to need to see a data set that looks like this? And then are you watching for who brings that data set back and then identifying them as a champion? Or are you thinking about like, hey, I'm going to assign, of the 4 of us on this call, I'm going to assign Craig that work and see if he brings it back?
Yeah. So ideally what happens is when we say, hey, to do the next thing, we're going to need a data set. Ideally, if we have leaders on that call, what leaders do is delegate, right? And so ideally we have a leader say, hey, Martin, I'm going to have you do this, or I'm going to get my EA involved and this person is going to go run this down for us, right? So hopefully when we say that, hopefully they're being proactive. If not, then we can ask like, hey, Matt, would you be the right person to run this down for us? Or do we need to bring somebody in? And their reaction to that will tell us a lot.
Yep.
Right. Yep. And then also like after that call, we need to be individually following up with the people on that call. And because like an army of champions is better than just one, right? And it's not just, and incidentally, it's not just better for us. It's better for them to have multiple executives saying to a CFO, we want this thing, right? Because then when they buy this thing, it's not just one executive's name who is attached to that, who has the risk then of, if this fails, my name is attached to it, versus if we have 5 people, 12 department heads saying we want this, like, not only is it better for us, it's not a selfish ask, it's actually better for them too.
That's amazing. Wait, you guys, I hate to do this. I forgot the second one.
Oh, geez. It's, do they bring other people?
Oh, so those two things kind of go together, right?
Yeah. So will they do work asynchronous of meeting with us?
I got that.
Do they bring other people to the next meetings? And then the third one was like, do they have a point of view on what comes next?
That's awesome.
On the prep, it mentioned like, a leave behind. I actually have those 2 things, like 2 slides that I can, if whoever's, just send me the best email and I'll send it to you so people can see it.
Awesome.
And Sam, what are we going to do with those?
Link them in the show notes and probably put an image right here.
Nice. Yeah, we'll do an image on her video cuts.
Yeah.
Right? Or is that stupid?
Yeah, and in the full episode. And we'll link them in the show notes.
Look at that. Look at the synergies. I love this. Okay, so I think this is actually, it's amazing because there's so many things in sales where you kind of listen and you're like, God, that makes sense. And you never thought of it. That was a remarkable start to the show. So you think today you would describe how we don't cultivate champions. We hope they raise their hand as one. Is that that's one. The second is, I think salespeople assume that the first person they do a call with is their champion. Is that another?
Oh my God. That's such a pet peeve of mine. Like,
all right, I got one right.
Taking a call with us does not make someone a champion. It makes them a contact. We have no idea. We have no idea whether they will be a champion or not. I have had people take calls with us because they favor a different solution and they want to see our demo so they know how to set up the evaluation, so they know what they're up against in the evaluation, right? Yeah. I've had people take calls with us because they have to, because of regulation or internal policy, they have to do due diligence and have 3 things. And they already know which one they want, but they have to do due diligence and go find out information. That's what we call column fodder, right? You've just become information to get plugged in their column to show they do due diligence. Taking a meeting with us does not make someone a champion. It makes them a contact.
Okay, that's great. So if you, If we were going to help someone think about this, so, the asynchronous work. So basically, we want to set sales up with this idea of like, what is that asynchronous work we could ask each of the potential champions that were on the call to go bring something to whatever next step is in someone's sales process. So we would enable against something like that. The second part would be like, is that more of like just like a thing, a set of things that you would do in the closing moments of a sales call to try to ask them about bringing other people, or do we test them and set up the next call and see if they bring other people? I'm going to give you all my questions in a sec. And then I actually got the last one. The last one we sort of dug in on, but on the other two, like in terms of helping sales go execute against those top two, like those would be my questions. Like how do we put those in play?
Are we talking about asynchronous work or bringing other people, or both?
We could both, but let's start with two because we haven't dug in on that.
Yeah. So when we think about bringing other people to the meeting, I am of the opinion, especially in enterprise, that we should be teaching buyers how to buy. And so when we get on that call, especially in enterprise, I should say, we've gone through the discovery call and been like, hey, Matt, I appreciate you joining today. It sounds like you're seeing some value and there's potential that we could be solving this problem for you. Lots of legwork yet to do to really prove that out. Typically is a magic word. And we can talk about that in a second, but typically is a magic word. Typically what happens next is one of three things. We either do an in-depth demo, you and I, and maybe some folks in your department, so you have a real solid idea of what we do. Second is there are usually three departments involved in buying my thing. It's operations, it's HR, and it's IT. And so in looking at your org, I would imagine Sarah, your VP of IT, and Chris, your VP of operations. I would imagine that's probably who needs to be involved or whose team needs to be involved. Every org is different. Is there a different next step that you think would be better? Right? Because I heard you say you used to be a teacher. I used to be a teacher. No one likes essay questions. Everybody likes multiple choice, right? Like I'm offering you a choice and saying and I use the magic word typically. Why typically is magic is because the psychology of sales is like what I love about it and why it never gets old. As human beings, we are herd mammals. We feel safe when we do what other people are doing, right? Herd theory. So and from a B2C capacity, that's why Amazon tells you, or every other shopping website tells you, people who looked at this also looked at this. People who looked at this ultimately bought this. Or they show you three, good, better, best, and they say most common or most often purchased, right? That's typically in a B2C capacity because we want to know what everyone else is doing. Mm-hmm. And it feels less risky, right? We're like, oh, I'm making the choice that other people made. Got it, right?
Yeah.
At least that's if I'm wrong, we're all wrong together.
Right. It's less risky because other people have done it this way. And if I don't know how to do it, and you're telling me most people do it, but I'm also leaving it. I'll notice I also left it open-ended and allowed for the fact that it may be very different in your organization. And if you are a savvy buyer who just brought on new technology for a different thing 3 months ago, you probably know the better path in your org. Yeah. You may know that there's somebody in procurement that we have to bring in right away. I dealt with two VPs at a large cybersecurity company. They both wanted it, what we were selling. And they both said, before we show this to anyone else, we have to bring in this IT executive, because if he can't fit this on the roadmap, or if he believes that this will mess up our integrations, this will go nowhere. Yeah. And that was fantastic because they knew how their organization worked.
Yeah. So this is the number one problem that I see with early stage, I guess, startup companies that are selling either a disruptive technology or a novel technology. No one knows how to buy their product. No one. Right. And they oftentimes end calls the same way. Right. Like a very sort of inexperienced account executive will end the call by saying, so what do you want to do next?
What do you want to do next?
Right.
I was like, I almost asked you to let me predict what that phrase was. Yeah. Where should we go from here?
Exactly. And they don't know because they've never bought it. Well, I have no idea. Right. So the thing that I've always said to people is like, suggest something based upon what most people do. But I like your take on typically, because most almost feels like, oh, well, everyone does this. But if your organization is different, or if there's a different process or whatever, it feels like very exclusionary. So I like the phrase, or I like the word typically there.
Yeah, like phrases matter, small things matter. And I would say, if you, to your point about startups or like disruptive technology or like new technology, people don't know what it is, or any organization that has brand new salespeople, like new.org, I have never, ever been enabled as a new seller coming into an organization with any sort of like spreadsheet of like, here is the technical like part of the evaluation, like from start to finish, here is what happens in our sale. And so what that now, I am a self-starter, you don't need to hold my hand. And so I will go find your top sellers and make them tell me what is, I'll listen to their, call recordings and watch what they say. And then I'll ask them, okay, this is what I think the sales process is. This is what I think happens on the second call. This is what I think I should be suggesting, and have them tell me. Organizations should be taking that knowledge from between people's ears, whether it's the founder who's done the first $1 million worth of sales or the other salespeople there, and writing down, this is what typically happens after the first call, but it could be these two things. This is what typically happens after the second call. It could be these two things. You will speed up your sales cycle immeasurably when you just tell people how to guide that process, because if no one knows what to do next, that goes nowhere.
They do nothing.
It's hard to buy something. It's hard to buy something because it's change management. It's hard to change. And if so much about sales is like, our job as salespeople is like understanding what's in it for them, what's in it for me, for everyone involved, and friction reduction, making it easy for them to do the next thing.
By the way, if you guys don't mind me interjecting a fun fact, is that all right?
Please, yes.
Okay. My first girlfriend in middle school, I ripped off a piece of binder paper and wrote, "Will you go steady with me?" And I drew the box yes and the box no. I gave her a multiple choice. Yeah.
Well, we're all here with bated breath, man. What happened?
Well, I said my first girlfriend, but the answer was yes. The answer was yes, but not from the note. I didn't get the note back. We talked after, and she said yes. So
she was a smart negotiator and understands that all the best negotiations happen in person and not
Did you have her do any work asynchronously for you just to determine whether or not she was a champion for the relationship?
Yeah. Okay. Let's go. Yeah. That by the way, that was really helpful. And then number one, though, on the asynchronous work. So let's say this would be new, I'm sure, to a lot of the people you work with. So I'm assuming I'm looking at the sales process. I'm thinking about what the next step is normally. And then I'm thinking about what things can I ask them to go do and bring to the table. It could be number two, by the way. Like it could be bringing people, but like do we codify this? Like, this is something that we would, I'm assuming, as you said, we go write this down. Like, what do we do? So we're looking at the next step and we're saying, what things could we ask them to go do? Or how should we approach that and implement number one into our sales process?
Whoa, this is no one's ever done it. No one's ever done it. I love it.
I had a thought.
I love it.
I was like,
let's go.
And while you were on, I got a really weird message on my screen from someone, someone separate. So I was like, anyway, all right, what do we got? So
I don't know what to do with that information.
It's all discovery data. Yeah, this is great.
I mean, and these are so that this way we're not asking people to do the same thing, right? Like, because one department is probably going to have the data that we need. And if we have leaders on the call, the somebody else that they're probably going to bring, that we probably want them to bring to the next call, is like a manager or a director from their team that is going to do the heavy lifting, or the end user that's going to do the heavy lifting of the evaluation, right? Because leaders look at something and decide, is this something that's even aligned with our goals, or is going to, help us de-risk something? Are we going to move forward on this? And then they send what I call like the scouting party, right? Like, leaders come in if we have leaders involved at the beginning, they're involved at the beginning, and then they dip out while other people do the more technical evaluation. So then, and that should be, ideally, they're going to go talk to that person on their own, but that's definitely something we can suggest. Like, hey, at this point, I'd usually say, we need an IT manager to come take a look at this, they're going to want to know if if we're going to mess up your integrations. So we might as well take a look at that now so we can answer all those questions. Right.
So what Krysten just did, if I can interject for any of the audio listeners, is she shared her screen, and it's part of a wonderful leave behind that we will have linked in the show notes, with some examples of asynchronous work for your champion. Sorry.
Okay, well, flow has now been disrupted. I mean, Sam, that was a good interlude, I know, but like the moment of silence after, we're just trying to. So what I was going to say, you just brought up, I just want to either reemphasize or double click, which is, in most cases, our sales reps are starting lower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, because the example, if we get the executives, which we've sort of, brought up here, obviously, I think, that's great. And they're, loop in other folks. But in most use cases, in particular, if demand is being generated, marketing or whatever, it's going to be bottom up. And so is the asynchronous work to bring in their executive, or is the asynchronous work to build the use case, or what do you see most often there?
Yeah, it could be either. So a lot of times and it is more typical that we would start lower than leaders. It's much faster if we can start at the top of that. But when we have an SDR, XDR motion where they're making calls, it's just much easier to get like a manager or director on the phone, right? Than it is a VP or COO. So it's not unusual. And so, so they, like a manager or a director, someone who cannot sign something, like they can't sign a purchase order. So in my view, they cannot be a champion, but they can be a coach. Mm-hmm. A champion is someone who has power, who has the power to sign. Right. But we don't need just champions. We need coaches as well, who are going to teach us like how to navigate the org, who can be an advocate for us, who understand how what we do benefits them and the teams they lead. Sometimes sales reps are told, like, get high in the organization, get to leaders. That's important. But multi-threading, especially in enterprise, we have to be present at 3 levels in the organization. Like, we have to be working with people who are end users. We have to be working with people who are managers of end users. And then we have to be working with executives. They all care about different things. Mm-hmm. And we have to be able to speak that language. But yes, to your point of, if we are starting lower than that, the manager, director level, then the asynchronous work is to have them loop in a leader. Yeah. Right. And again, with like teaching them how to buy. So if I have a manager or a director and they really like what they've seen in the demo, what I want to do as far as teaching them how to buy, so I don't waste my time or theirs, is say, hey, Matt, it seems like you've seen some value. Seems like you think this might be a way that we could help. I got to tell you, in the last 2 years, it has never been harder to bring on new technology in an organization. And what I have found in dealing with many other customers is if this does not align with an executive priority, it will not go anywhere. And so like from your experience and your knowledge of the organization, like what is the executive priority that we best align with, right? If they don't know, that's it. It doesn't mean they still can't be helpful, but that's a different conversation, right? If they do know, okay, then who's responsible for that priority? And here's some ways typically that we would, start to work with them, right? So we have to, the way that we teach people to buy is different based on their level in the organization as well. So they may not bring a leader yet. That may not be a bad thing. They may bring a peer, right? Because if we have 12 managers or directors going to a VP and saying, we need this thing, that's a very different thing than just one, right? So just because they're not bringing their boss doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It's just the test is, will they bring someone else, right? Like, will they help us navigate the org?
And let me ask you this, like once they bring someone, do you feel like they are sort of a magnet for other people? Is that like a signifier that, hey, look, like maybe we run a long sales cycle. I do my first call with this person. By the next call, they've brought one or two additional people. Have they sort of broken the dam, so to speak, and now you can ask them like, hey, like it was great that you brought, Sam and Craig on the call. Next time, do you think you could also bring like Susan and Tom?
Yeah, so that's another thing we could ask. Something else that we can ask is, hey, we on that call, because we're good salespeople, we didn't leave without next steps. And the next step is this meeting. It's this, it's a deeper level meeting with Susan and Tom. I want to make sure that you look good because you are the one who helped bring me into this conversation. I have the deck that I'm going to run through in that presentation. Will you look it over to make sure that we're on the right track? Or will you get me the data that we need to inform that next meeting? But them looking over, just asking them to look over a slide deck so that make sure that, because if they brought you in, they should care about how that next conversation goes because they don't want to look like idiots. And so it's
Absolutely.
So it's like, do you want to look at this deck asynchronously, or do you want to schedule 15 minutes and go through this to make so that you can tell me, like, don't use this slide, don't say that, he hates that word. This is the buzzword. Like when they start telling you how to speak to the organization, that's a very good sign that they're going to be like a champion or a coach. We can also, another thing that we can ask them for, that's again a very low, like light touch, but will they share it with us? Important initiatives in the business always have a name. There's always like a code phrase, a catch name. It's 25 million in 2025, right? It's project pipeline. Like I've seen it called so many things. It always has a name. And so if you say, hey, generally, if this initiative is important, there's something people call it internally. What are people calling this? They tell you that. You can reference that in every email, in every presentation, because you want that presentation to look like theirs. You want the communication to look like theirs. And the more you like speaking the same language makes people one of us, not one of them, right? Like language shows we are one of you. And so like if they give you that internal language. So for example, if I'm selling to an insurance agency, they don't call their sellers salespeople, they call them producers or they call them brokers. I should never call them account executives. I should never call them sellers. I should refer to them as producers. And if I, as the salesperson, don't know that, my champion or my coach should be like, hey, just so you know, it can be like, that can be like that can be coaching, right? Like, it's just like, hey, you say sellers, but with us, like, we don't call it that. Like, we call it producers. If you say that, we should replace that in the deck. Like, that's how we should say it.
That was pretty cool.
Hell
Can
yeah.
I add? Yeah, one thing I want to ask, I hope to not fully divert us, but you triggered me on something that Chris mentioned is, when we were talking about multi-threading, and you said in this call, and you want to follow up individually with each person on the call. So you totally because that is so specific and so smart. So, and I remember this. So I had read, this is actually the story of how you got here, because I had read this where it was something about how salespeople say they're multi-threading because they had 10 people on a call, and then they send a reply all, thank you. And at the time I credited Chris, he made sure you got the credit, don't worry. But he said, no, like, because I had said that is a brilliant insight, which is after that call, you want to follow up with everyone personally. And then you added in this call, like in the case of champion development, we might ask other people to do specific asynchronous things as well. I just wanted to dive in on that because I think it's an amazing insight and something everyone can do. So I don't know if I described it perfectly, but like if you wanted to add some more.
Yeah, knowing exactly what you're talking about. And it kind of falls on the line in that same vein of like, what do I think people get wrong? When we send an email, a mass email to 10 people, that is like sometimes what we feel passes for multi-threading. That is not multi-threading. That's mass emailing. Well, true multi-threading is establishing single lines of communication with anyone who influences a deal. And the little phrase that rings in my head whenever when I'm sending actually any email, like, if it's no one's baby, it's an orphan. Like, think about how you look at email. If it has 5 people's name at the top, most people are like, archive, not my responsibility. There's 5 people's name at the top of that, right? Just like human psychology. Versus if it is directly to you, it's clear. I'm asking you for this. Like, we are talking about this. And the other reason that it has to be, there's multiple reasons it has to be single lines of communication. One is, to make it their baby, right? Like, because it's their email. The second is that like I talked about, like what's in it for me, like the win of acquiring like my product is different for every different level of the organization. If you're an end user, all you care about is, does this technology make my day easier or harder? That's it. If you're a manager of an end user, what you care about is, does this thing help my team on a metric I am measured on? Does it help increase revenue? Does it help our efficiency? Does it mean we are free? We can spend more hours on a different product or a different project? Like, that's all managers of end users care about. Then executives care about, does this help us accomplish our initiatives, deal with risk, capture market share, like those level of things. If I email an executive about a feature function, I've lost them. If I email an end user about like how this will help their mitigate business risk over the next 3 months, I've lost them. They don't care. So we have to be single threaded with those people, because we have to essentially speak, and this is, and again, in enterprise, like 3 different languages. If you're not doing enterprise, or if your sales cycle is not as long or like not as involved, it still is usually 2, right? It's 2 different levels in an organization. So you multi-thread by single threading.
That is a headline. Okay, cool. Sorry, I just thought of it on the, and I think about, so it's interesting is like, well, both things on this call just help bring both things together for me. By the way, the one I always used to tell sales guys is the 911 rule, right? Which is like when you're training in first aid, it's like you never say call 911. You say, Matt, call 911. And you otherwise nobody will call 911. And it's a very similar thing, which is like, well, you could send this big email and then that ball is just going to sit like it's not, and you're asking very specific things of folks. Sorry, I'm just recapping through some of the things. So the second thing you said I thought was important on the champion. So the champion has to be able to effectuate the transaction since it's the show. But when we're looking at, is there anything, so we got the 3 attributes, but they also, sounds like they have to be people that could actually sign or initiate a buying process. And then so I wrote that down. Is there anything else we need to think about on the champion in terms of, would we add to the, outside of the 4 that we just discussed on the call today?
What do you mean the 4 that we discussed?
Well, will they do asynchronous work? Do they bring people to the call? And then do they have a narrative on how things get bought there? And then we said, well, they also have to be an executive and have to be able to buy. Is there anything else you would add to that?
Yeah. So if you think about it, like one set of criteria is what someone is, and another set of criteria is what someone will do, right? So if we think about what someone is, to be a champion, they have to have power. They have to want to believe that our solution is the best solution to that problem and actively work behind the scenes to sell when we are not in the room. That's who a champion is. When we think about what they do, they don't get there overnight, right? So unless they've bought this before and this is how they've had success in another organization, so they're going to bring it in. Most champions are not just delivered to your doorstep. They're developed, and you develop them by seeing what they will do. And the first thing is early in the sales cycle is, will they do this asynchronous work, right? And then it's asynchronous work happens throughout the cycle. But yeah, there's characteristics of what someone is, and then there's characteristics of what they will do.
Mm-hmm. Got it. That's perfect. Okay, well said. I got that.
Now, and like I said, though, we don't need just champions. I feel sometimes salespeople, I've seen salespeople ignore people that are quote below the line, they're not executives. And you do that at your own peril, right? Because of how hard it is to buy something and how much consensus people want to have. If the end users, and therefore the managers of end users, don't believe our thing will work and don't want it, there's very few executives that are going to buy that thing in the face of that. You can't ignore someone who's not, and nor should you. Because as a salespeople, we should be helping the organization. And so if it's not going to help them, if it can't work, we have to know that by working with people that are, not just champions, but also coaches. So people that will help us that essentially don't have any power to sign anything, but they have the term might be soft power, right? They have influence in the org.
Yep. Yep. Influence. They can help you navigate. These are incredibly important people in a deal cycle.
People.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. People. My goodness.
No, that was actually piggybacking, not making fun of. I was down with it. All right, cool. People. So that was interesting. I got more than I bargained for. I love the tact you took here, because that was stuff I wrote down that I need to make sure that everyone's doing. I thought I'm so glad I didn't know, because that was a really helpful, really specific, really interesting thing that you are correct. The market doesn't know that they're not handling right. So that's what we try to do here on the transaction, Krysten. So I thought that was an amazing call. And yes, Sam, show notes are in play. Show notes are in play and other things. Well, Krysten, thank you so much. It was great hanging out, and look forward to seeing more of your stuff out there in the wild. And it's been I've been learning from you even before I met you. So it's been hopefully everyone that's listening to the show is going to get that value and want to hear more from you as well. So thanks.
Thank you so I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for the kind words. It was fun. These are like the best conversations.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of The Transaction. Craig and I really appreciate the fact that you've listened all the way to the end. What are you actually doing here? For show notes and other episodes, please visit us at thetransactionpod.com. Like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other place you get your podcast from. Either you have walked away from your podcast device, or this is playing somewhere in the background. Someone in your house would really like for you to shut this off now.